What's up, everybody? This is Whiskey in the Six. I'm Rob. Doing Compass Box Hedonism. So this is about 19 years old on average. Compass Box reveals pretty much everything there is to know about their whiskey if you ask nicely. You can send them an email. They also have a chart that explains what's inside the bottle. All right, I got this a while ago and I've been putting it off. It's a blended grain whiskey. Okay, so almost every single one, if not every single one of the Compass Box whiskeys are blends, and this one's no exception. It's 100% first fill American oak casks, natural color, non-chill filtered. It's non-chill filtered despite only being 43%. Yeah, 43%. Blended grain, which means it could be malted barley with unmalted barley. Could be some rye whiskey in there. There could be some corn whiskey in there. There could be some whatever. All right, so that's why it's a blended grain. When I first opened this, I felt it was a little uptight. It's hard to smell. There wasn't a lot going on with it. It has opened up quite a bit since I've opened it. It's been about 6 months now. But what I get here is coconut, apples, maybe like the subtle smell of like a peach or a nectarine, a little bit of mango maybe. All right, on the palate, so on the palate, it's crazy how much this reminds me of a well-aged Canadian whiskey. It reminds me a lot of a Canadian club, to be honest with you. So for those of you that think you don't like Canadian whiskey, if you like this whiskey, you probably would like most Canadian whiskeys. There's some spiciness to this on the nose and on the palate. Maybe like a dill. I'd be curious to know what the grains are inside of this whiskey, what type of grain whiskeys these are, right? I don't think it says anything about that here. Definitely a lot of vanilla with this one. Butterscotch, that sort of stuff. The color's super light. Probably not a very heavily charred cask. This is only the third Compass Box that I've tried. I believe I tried the General. That was compliments of Scotty from the Scotch Test Dummies. I tried, obviously, this one, the Hedonism, and I also tried the Enlightenment. So far, the General has been by far my favorite. I didn't get a chance to mark it because I only had a sample of it, but that one's been my favorite so far. This one's probably my second favorite. I like it a little bit better than Enlightenment. It's good stuff. Is it something that I could drink every day? Probably not. I just lean towards single malts or malted blends. So this is good stuff. This is for my palate, it's probably like an 85, so an A right on the dot. But I know for a fact that there's a bunch of people out there that would absolutely love this, especially if you're a big Canadian whiskey fan. If you love Canadian whiskey, you're definitely gonna really enjoy this one. Compass Box does awesome things. It says right on the box, or right on the bottle, sorry, rich vanilla, alluring. There's a ton of vanilla with this. There's a ton of really nice fruit flavors with this. something about the finish that reminds me so much of a Canadian whiskey with this one. That's not a bad thing. It's just not my preference right now. And I want to emphasize right now because my palate has changed 30 times, if not more, in the last 10 years. I started only drinking Canadian whiskey. I drank Canadian whiskey probably for a good 5 to 6 years. Moved on to some bourbon and some non-peated scotches. Then I just evolved from there, and I really liked peated whiskeys. And now it's a little bit of everything, but I still lean toward something with a little bit of sherry, a little bit of peat, and a little bit of a higher ABV. So that's probably what drags this down in market. Yeah, good stuff. Not my favorite. Is it worth buying? Probably. It's one of the cheaper Compass Box whiskeys at around 80 bucks, 90 bucks, depending on where you are. So good stuff, just not my favorite. You guys can check me out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You guys can also check me out on Patreon. Cheers.